Welcome everyone. We'll start in a minute or so as more attendees arrive. Please stay back. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. To introduce myself, I'm Shashidhar, and I'm part of Citrix Ready technical team. So I would like to welcome you all to this Citrix Ready technical webinar series, where we showcase how Citrix and our partners have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions for the common problems faced by our customers today. Next slide, please. So to talk about Citrix Ready program, Citrix Ready program is an end-to-end technology program that showcases and recommends third-party products, solutions, and services, and also demonstrate the compatibility with Citrix products. The customers can quickly and easily find solutions recommended by Citrix in the Citrix Ready marketplace by navigating to citrixready.citrix.com. And to get more information about the Citrix Ready program, you can navigate to citrix.com/partnerprograms/Citrix Ready. Next slide, please. So we've seen like over a few years, Citrix has evolved a lot, and we have moved to cloud now, and our entire workspace services portfolio is available in the form of Citrix Cloud Services now. So these cloud services are readily available to consume. Well, in most cases, all you need to do is subscribe and activate them. The benefit to you is that the core infrastructure that you would typically have to install, manage, and maintain and upgrade yourself is now managed for you as a service. Most companies are on a cloud journey and need a better way to provide their users with access to apps, data, and services they need, and a better way to for the IT to provision, manage them, and then secure all of it. So our cloud transformation isn't just about making our independent products available as cloud services, but also we are unifying our products into an integrated portfolio of services where it could be more holistically address the needs of today's hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So this means for you, it's a better way to provide any service to any user in a simple, fast, secure, and adaptable way. Next slide, please. Thank you. Citrix virtual apps and desktops, whether on-prem version or the virtual apps and desktop service on Citrix Cloud, it's a central component of the Citrix workspace. So as its very core, if you think about centralizing your apps and desktops and then provisioning and then providing secure remote access from any device, this is the way to go. So this enables you to embrace BYOD or low-cost endpoints, empowering your employees to work from anywhere. And more importantly, it eliminates your IT headache of PC management, patching, and it gives more time for you to focus on other important IT incentives. So please explore Citrix Cloud Services and get a feel of how easy it is to use Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So today in this webinar, we will talk about how RapidScale's managed cloud Citrix Cloud Desktop complements the just mentioned points and how one could benefit out of the technology. So before we start the presentation, if we have any questions during this webinar, please use the question panel on the right-hand side, and we will take your questions in the Q&A session at the end. And this webinar is also getting recorded, so it will be published to you after the webinar. So without any further delay, please welcome Dylan from RapidScale, who would be talking about RapidScale's managed Citrix Cloud Desktop. Dylan, over to you.
Thank you, Shashi. Appreciate that, and thanks for having us on the webinar today. We've been in the managed cloud space for about 12 to 13 years now, and a very early adopter for virtual applications, virtual desktops in a hosted manner. So very happy to be on. Go ahead and talk a little bit about the agenda. We're going to talk about why RapidScale, who RapidScale is, if you haven't heard of us, and what services we use with Citrix. And if you're not necessarily in the consumer role, but maybe in a partner role where you might want to leverage our services as a supplier for your customers, and we'll talk very briefly about some services and resources that we have available there. So RapidScale, again, has been around for about 12 years. We were actually Citrix Partner of the Year in 2017 for growth and enablement. And at the time, that was big for us. We were an independent company and had put a lot of years and effort and time into making the hosted virtual desktop model work. And it was great to be recognized by one of our technology partners for what we had been doing for the market. So what we really do is help, and we have kind of a niche market. Large enterprises might leverage us for a component of their IT needs. Smaller companies will leverage us as their managed service provider from a cloud-based perspective. So we'll manage their day-to-day IT needs from a cloud perspective and augment their team and extend the bench from a technical perspective. A year and a half ago, we were purchased by Cox Enterprises, and we are now a subsidiary of Cox Business. And it's been a fantastic transition for us. Cox Business has every intention of essentially adding fuel to the fire and helping us do what we've been doing very well, better and faster, and scale more rapidly. Pun intended there. So what do we do? Which, if you know what a cloud managed services provider are, that's basically what we do. I think we do it very well. That's reflected in our Net Promoter Score, if you're familiar with what that is. A lot of telco providers, for instance, will have a relatively low NPS. It's a tough job supporting those services, and those NPS scores will be in the low double digit, maybe even single digit. If you talk about companies like Apple and Southwest and some of those larger companies that have fantastic connections with their customers, you'll see those NPS scores get much closer to 100. So they'll be in the 70s and 80s. Our NPS score is a transactional NPS score. And what that means is every ticket that comes through our system, we're sending out a survey to the customer. A subset of those customers will actually reply back to the survey and give us their feedback. Now, people are submitting tickets because they're having problems with something or they need something done. So the fact that we have in the upper 70s and 80 and sometimes low 80s in our NPS score, I think is pretty significant and speaks to the dedication we have to the services and products and customers. So we do try and take a proactive management perspective on our day-to-day needs. We'll talk a bit about our pillars of focus here in just a moment. We have been developing a single pane of glass, which brings you into a visibility into billing, into the services being consumed, being able to manipulate some of those services, and we're continuing that development every day with additional functionality, and much of that functionality comes from feedback from our customers. If we could go ahead and throw up the first poll question. Be interested to hear or get some feedback from the audience on whether or not you're planning to move to a managed provider when it comes to virtual apps and virtual desktop needs. So you should see that poll on the screen. We'll leave that up here for a couple of seconds. Again, interested to hear some of the feedback. If anyone on the call, again, is looking to at some point move, and this is not a sales question, it's really more of understanding the audience and understanding how you guys might be leveraging virtual desktops, and if you're looking at a managed provider or looking to do it yourself. If you're saying no to this, and that might imply that you're looking to do it yourself. Sashi, I'll hand it to you for feedback on when we've gotten the feedback to continue.
Yeah, I just closed the poll, and yeah, you can take it from there.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll go on to the next slide here. So our pillars of focus, we are constantly looking to innovate and consider how we can make our customers' lives better. And just to give you an understanding of where we impact the customer is a lot of our competitors, a lot of our of other providers in the market will only do infrastructure management and not get down into the end user interaction. We absolutely provide services all the way down to the end user, which I think is super important when you're providing a service that is directly consumed by the end user. And we're always looking to innovate how we can make that experience better and how it can ultimately service the customer better. We also provide migration and implementation, and every customer is different. So clearly, it's not going to be a one size fits all, or even certain buckets to say, well, if you don't fit into one of these buckets, then it's not going to work for us. We don't do everything, otherwise we wouldn't be able to support the things that we do. But we feel like we have a really good mix of the services that we provide, much of those via Citrix. And the adoption of that for our customers and the customers' needs that we have. And we do try the best. If anybody follows me on Twitter or LinkedIn, I'll oftentimes use the hashtag the human cloud. There's lots of ways you can differentiate. At the end of the day, if all you're doing is consuming cloud resources, then that's not really a partner, it's a vendor. And we really try and establish ourselves as a partner when it comes to a company. So what kind of IT challenges are we solving with our services? And again, much of that is really anchored by the technology that Citrix provides. If you're using an MSP today, there's a good chance it's a local MSP. They're using local talent. They might do a good job when they come into your office and they physically help with a desktop problem, but at the end of the day, they don't really have the expertise and the experience or the services and infrastructure to move you into a better solution. The company, you may be going through mergers and acquisitions, and they just really can't handle that scale and the ability to move you to the next level and evolve your IT strategy. You may have compliance concerns, PCI, HIPAA, ISO. A lot of those compliances can really add a lot of burden to a company when it comes to implementing security, having the IT team having to going out and evaluating technology and trying to put in place solutions that will pass internal and external audits, and being able to adhere to those compliance requirements. That's tough to do. And one of our best verticals are those that are compliance bound when it comes to the customers that we have. Security is an easy extension of compliance. We've got a lot of security products that we wrap around our Citrix-based solutions, whether it's endpoint management or internal vulnerability scanning and SIEM and firewall and DDoS mitigation and web security and DNS filtering. There's a lot that we do around security to help with those compliance, and whether it's a checkbox or it's best practice, or it's because we've got a customer that actually has a budget to go above and beyond on security. They really want to protect themselves. We're able to provide that. One of the poll questions probably should be, is your IT department overworked? But I would expect 100% to reply yes. Same to the understaffed question. That's pretty common. And that's, again, where we really do well is where we come in and extend the bench of that IT department, allow them to focus on the line of business applications and take over the mundane day-to-day. That's a really common theme with almost anyone we get in front of and talk to, whether it's from the C-suite all the way down to the IT systems engineer or network engineer. And we don't come in with a premise or a tone of trying to replace people. That's not the idea. We're trying to make the business better at what they do. With that, let's go ahead and go to the next poll question. So have you deployed virtual desktops for your organization? And apologize for that being misspelled. That's my that's my bad. In the past or currently. So not the same as the first question, but this is, have you deployed it, maybe in your own infrastructure, in the past, or do you currently have virtual desktops deployed? And that'll kind of help us understand from the audience perspective if this is something you're looking to do, or if you've done it and you just want to understand more about the virtual desktops that or the virtual infrastructure that you put in place. And again, I'll hand it back to Sashi for some feedback on when we feel like we've got some good responses there.
Yeah, so I'll just close the poll, and 91% said yes. So that's a pretty good percentage.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So based on the responses from the first poll and the responses from the second poll, it sounds like probably the majority of the audience has actually deployed internally and isn't currently using a managed provider, or may or not be looking to use a managed provider. That's cool. That's fine. There's, we have some large enterprise customers that, do most of their IT internally, and when it came to deploying or needing to deploy, they saw the value of virtual applications and virtual desktops. When it came to the concept of deploying that, they didn't want to, number one, spend the budget for the CapEx for deploying the infrastructure for that. They hadn't done it before, so clearly it'd be a learning curve, and they didn't have the internal skills to deploy that. So we're a small part of the IT budget when it comes to the components that we provide for that customer, but we are doing the virtual desktop piece of it. So what is a RapidScale cloud desktop solution, and what is it that we do? So try and wrap your head around how we could potentially fit into your IT strategy. First, an implementation is completely 100% led by a RapidScale project manager, and that could be in tandem with your project manager or your customer's project manager, and a lot of times it is. We have a point of contact with the consumer, and they'll set up biweekly calls, weekly calls, whatever that frequency needs to be, with all the right internal resources on our side. And for migrations, we'll have a statement of work that somebody on my team will draft, and I run the solutions engineering team here at RapidScale. So my guys would be heavily engaged in the pre-sales process, understanding the requirements, presenting the solution, adjusting the solution where it needs to be so it's appropriate for your needs, and then drafting that statement of work that both parties sign off on, and then that's kind of the recipe or instructions for moving into that implementation. So for coordinating that, obviously the project manager is doing that. We have different desktop configurations that we can do. We're very flexible in that regard, whether it's a Windows 10 ISO, whether it's a Windows 10 experience based on a server OS, or a session host based experience. We can accommodate for each of those. And I think we'll talk a little bit about additional services like advanced graphics. Ongoing configuration management is inherent to our services. I think we also have a slide on about co-management, which is really important and a bit of a differentiator from our side. But so I'll wait before I go into that. Our rapid response support, this is where I talked about our network promoter score being an 80. That's our support team. They are, I would say, primarily based here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I sit. We do have a team of support engineers and implementation engineers also in Irvine, California, and our support is all US based as it stands. For Citrix maintenance, we are a Citrix service provider, so we're a CSP, and because of that, just as you would get with, say, Office 365 with a subscription model, you get continuous updates to the latest. So anytime Citrix releases a new version, we have the ability to move you to that. It doesn't happen automatically, but we have the ability to move you to that from a subscription perspective when in a maintenance window, whenever it's deemed necessary or desired. And we'll do complete monitoring on that infrastructure. We have a 99.9% SLA, and the desktop image is also patched on a regular basis, whether that's set by the customer or a regular occurrence that we'll do on our side for best practice. And then For larger customers that have complex solutions through us, we also have a service called Enterprise Client Project Management, and that's a persistent project manager that sticks with the account for the duration of the service, for the duration of the relationship, and as opposed to just having an account manager that's there in case you need to buy more stuff. This is actually a technical project manager that continues to run projects, whether it's a project that you have on your internal side or it's one that we're running on our side. There's a regular touch points back to either biweekly, bi-monthly, weekly calls, just to ensure that we're all on the same page when it comes to your needs, your projects, and there's no surprises. Sashi, let's go ahead and do another poll question. And I believe this one is whether or not you believe a virtual desktop solution is more or less secure than a traditional IT desktop. I would like to think everyone will answer in a similar fashion, but again, I'd like to understand what the audience thinks from a security perspective, whether or not you feel a virtual desktop or hosted virtual desktop solution is more or less secure than the traditional model.
Okay. Yeah, I could see good percentage are saying it's more secure. So about 90% say like more secure.
Okay.
So I'm going to close the poll.
Yeah, and certainly that answer is going to vary based on the implementation and based on the IT environment, what's wrapped around it. We've done our best from the implementation, whether it's the configuration of Citrix Virtual Desktop or the services inside the virtual desktop, say, for instance, DNS protection. We use 48 firewalls, virtual firewalls for most of the environments. It's not a requirement, but that's what we default to. Configuring those with unified threat management and having, again, security services wrapped around that, we feel like it's significantly more secure and way less overhead, considerably less overhead from the IT perspective than a traditional IT model where the company's data is out roaming around on laptops. Number one, productivity can be diminished if devices are lost, stolen, or damaged. But also the company's data is literally roaming around airports and coffee shops and wherever it may be. And it's more vulnerable in those scenarios. You probably have disk encryption. You probably have some additional authentication from the login perspective, maybe privacy screens. But at the same time, it's in most cases, depending on the implementation of the virtual desktop, is going to be more secure when you have it isolated in the same environment as the hosted infrastructure that backs up those applications. So for implementation, we really intend to be, as long as we're allowed to be, the trusted advisor that is working alongside you in the implementation, in the pre-sales process for designing the solution, but also the implementation and getting you to a place where the solution we've put in front of you for your users is improving your internal efficiency when it comes to the end users. It isn't always going to be necessarily a cost savings. It isn't necessarily always going to be one or two check boxes, but ultimately we want to look at the big picture and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the company. So the steps for implementation, I'll talk about those for a minute. In the preparation, we're going to have a project manager. We've talked about that a bit. We're going to have an internal kickoff meeting to make sure that all of our internal resources are on the same page. That's when my team basically presents to the internal engineering and implementation team what the solution is, what we're trying to accomplish, what challenges we're solving for the customer, and make sure everybody on the RapidScale side is on the same page. And then we have a kickoff meeting with the customer and the point of contacts that they share with us. From that point, we'll establish a plan, determine timeframes, determine what the success criteria is of the implementation. In some cases, that's pretty simple. In some cases, it might be more difficult. And then we'll gather the additional details that we need in order to start the implementation of the development, or of the solution, I should say. From that point, we start building out the Citrix infrastructure, and we have bundles that are specific to really the numbers of users that we're going to be servicing out of that Citrix infrastructure. There may be dual delivery controllers, there may be dual storefront, NetScalers, that will all be appropriately sized based on the number of users or based on the resiliency that is desired. Make sure all of the infrastructure is in place. We use vCloud Director on top of our physical infrastructure to ensure that we have secure multi-tenancy. The physical infrastructure is Cisco UCS in 4 different US data centers domestically and 2 internationally in Amsterdam and Hong Kong. From a storage perspective, we're leveraging primarily NetApp with flash-based SSD, so we don't have any issues from a disk I/O perspective around boot storms. We are also introducing Pure Storage as an option in some areas, so we have some alternatives. And then integration, whatever the requirements are, configuring storage network, integrating with AD if that's desired. Maybe it's a net new build that happens occasionally. Ensuring that the master images are built the way they need to be. In some cases, the customer will install those applications themselves because they want to do that. We'll again talk about the co-management model in just a second. And begin testing and then transitioning to the end user accounts. We provide disaster recovery services, data protection services, other types of solutions that kind of wrap around our Citrix virtual desktops. But generally, this implementation is the gist of it is the same, regardless of the solution that we're implementing. But it oftentimes is bigger than just building out the virtual desktop infrastructure. All right, before I move on to the management model, we've got another poll question we can throw out there. Tashi, if you could throw that out. And this is more of kind of a generic question. I suspect if you're on this call, the answer is probably yes, but is your company currently subscribing to cloud services like Office 365 or Salesforce or even Citrix Cloud? Given the answer to, are you using virtual desktops today? And the response on that, I suspect this is going to be a pretty high percentage on yes.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
I wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, it's about 90% again.
Okay. All right. That's usually one of the first questions we ask because we get into an opportunity and we really want to understand where the organization is when it comes to cloud adoption. That question is becoming less and less pertinent simply because we're getting to the point where more and more companies are at least subscribing to cloud-based email, cloud-based mail filtering, some type of cloud service. We oftentimes need to ensure that we're properly positioned when it comes to our customers, and if the business is more interested in capitalizing the hardware, they prefer to have the full, a full staff of FTEs, and they don't want to move any more to an OpEx model than they have to. So again, subscriptions on, say, Office 365 or subscriptions to Citrix licensing, then our value add might be diminished. It might be reduced. But those are good questions. And it's not to say that if the company prefers a capital spend on the solution that we can't have a good solution for them. We can still potentially provide services. It just means that we need to understand that so we know what types of services we are providing. So I saw the audience view changed for a second there. Are you guys all, Sashish, are you seeing the 3-tier management model on the screen now?
Yes, I'm seeing the same.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, this is specific to RapidScale. If we were to enter into a partnership, or if you're considering a managed cloud provider like RapidScale, this is where, in some cases, we really are differentiating from our competition or from maybe alternatives you might have. So on the far left of this, completely unmanaged, this is where we really become more of an AWS or an Azure. All we're really providing at that point is the infrastructure, the compute, the storage, maybe licensing. But at the end of the day, if you call us for support, that's not what you're paying for, and it would probably be a professional services engagement for us to assist. It's not common that we get into those opportunities simply because that's not where our value is. Certainly, as a Citrix CSP, we can provide the licensing and the compute resources, and that's, maybe that's all we do and wash our hands of it. But we normally are providing more support and more into that co-managed model on the far right. But I'll first shift to fully managed. Well, fully managed would mean you really are about as hands-off as it can get. You may have zero IT staff, and we're relied on for basically every decision made in the company. I would say that's also a scenario where it's more difficult for us because there's not someone that is really driving the strategy of IT that actually works for the company. So we prefer to look at this as where we are successful is between 1 and 10 IT people. Less than 1, there's no one driving that strategy internally. More than 10, you might have enough staff where you prefer to do this on your own, and you'll probably swing closer to either unmanaged or fully managed based on the number of IT people that you have. I think that makes sense. Where we're most successful and have our best partnerships with our customers is where we co-manage. There's an IT staff somewhere in that middle range, and we're an extension of that staff. A lot of times it's tech-to-tech type phone calls when the customer calls in. We might still be providing desktop support for the end users that are leveraging the virtual desktops, but the back-end infrastructure that supports the applications are going to be a tech-to-tech call where they may go into the firewall and apply a firewall policy because they have access to, and we permit that, we allow that. A lot of providers don't, because they don't want you breaking something and then them have to fix it. They're scared of that, to be honest. We're not, and we find that we have much better relationships with and partnerships with our customers when we give them that ability. They break it, we fix it. Hopefully they don't break it, but the intent there, or the idea there, is that they have the flexibility of doing it themselves, or they can rely on our engineers to do that. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm not going to read the bullets on the screen because you guys are able to do that yourselves. But hopefully that explains where we really feel we're best fit when it comes to the marketplace. All right, so our rapid response support. This is our support desk. When a customer is on board, they go through our implementation team. They then go through a customer onboarding team that transitions them from the implementation team to the support team. We feel like that's been a really good, relatively new add to our support and onboarding strategy, and a lot of customers prefer that, I should say, to just being handed over from implementation straight to support. But that generates a much higher Net Promoter Score. You'll see on this screen it says 75 plus, average being really the upper 70s. It said 80 on the first slide. That's definitely not a lie. I've seen it above 80. So our average, I guess, is around 80. But we have different tiers of problems that when a customer calls in, or I should say support needs when a customer calls in. And we ask that you don't call in and say everything is urgent. If you need a firewall change, that really just needs to be done sometime in the next maybe a couple of days. No big deal. Insert that ticket in the right response. That way, when you do need an urgent call and every other customer is abiding by that same priority level, you'll get the priority you need in that scenario, because the other tickets are also being properly assigned via priority. But you can see our service level objective when it comes to the response time. If it's urgent, we're on that within 15 minutes. Someone spun up and working on that issue, and then so on and so forth with the rest of those. And we can ingest support requests via email, chat, phone, also via our portal, and which we'll talk about on the next slide. So with that, I'll go on to talking about the single pane of glass that we have. This is a project that was spun up about a year and a half ago, shortly after the acquisition of RapidScale by Cox Business. We put a lot of effort and very intentional timelines and projects around getting this deployed. We're leveraging Kubernetes on the back end from a development perspective. We're very integrated into Microsoft Live and Azure and Azure AD. And because of that smart development, we've been able to very rapidly put this system in place. We also leverage very extensively APIs when it comes to ingesting information and gathering information from our different suppliers and partners, namely Citrix. So for instance, if you're leveraging a virtual desktop solution with us, our API on the back end is going to go out to Citrix based on our reporting to them, and the user names that are being reported to them, we'll pull that down, we parse that, we make sure that it's in the portal for the customer, and you can see what users are logging in based on the licenses that are being reported. And then if there's a delta from what you're paying for and what's being reported, then you'll see that delta. And that goes for backup solutions, it goes for vCPU, VRAM, across the board. The portal is not finished by any means, so we're continuing to evolve that to our customers' needs. And we love feedback about the portal as well. So if at some point, first of all, if we have any customers on the line, you already have access to this portal. If you don't, reach out to us, let us know. If you were to become a customer, certainly would love feedback about how you think it can improve so that it can better service our customers. All right, so what's the value add for upgrading to Citrix Cloud Desktop? And most of the people on the call have implemented virtual desktop, so this may be a little bit less of a value add to the audience. So I'll go through it relatively quickly. But you obviously have integration within Citrix when it comes to Azure, Azure AD, and Office 365 on a hosted virtual platform, being able to very quickly scale up CPU, RAM, whether it's in the existing delivery VMs or adding additional delivery VMs, that becomes much easier. You'll have a capital expense to grow the physical environment in order to do that. We do support advanced graphics within our environment. That typically is going to be a relatively private build just due to the technology and some of the limitations between GPUs and VMware, but that's absolutely something that we support and have customers using. And then all of that is fully managed so that, again, your teams can focus more, or your customers' teams, depending if you're a partner or consumer, can focus more on the line of business applications. So some of the value add there at the bottom, having the productivity tools for mobile workers. A lot of it that I've been hearing in going to like CIO forums and panels is that just if you think about it from an employee perspective, giving them the ability to very easily work from home in a secure manner that meets compliance requirements for the company. Just 2 days ago, I was in Jacksonville, Florida, and feedback from one of the audience members, they said they moved to a virtual desktop platform and were able to retain an employee that was moving to another city, valuable employee. They would have lost that employee otherwise. By moving to a virtual desktop solution, they were able to maintain keeping that employee in their role. Had they lost the employee, obviously it would have been costly to the company for recruiting and then training and getting somebody back up to speed. And if you think about the flip side of that, having that virtual desktop infrastructure in place also gives them the ability to open up their recruiting to a region that's larger than just the office that they historically had to support. So this is a map of our deployment of virtual infrastructure. I talked a bit about the hardware and what that looks like underneath the covers. This is where we sit. We don't have the overhead of operating data centers, so these are not our physical buildings, but we are in tier 3 plus facilities with cage space in Irvine, Dallas, Chicago, Sterling, Virginia, and I mentioned Amsterdam and Hong Kong earlier. And there is private connectivity between each of these facilities with multi-10 gig. I believe we're on a track right now to upgrade that to 100 gig. And then we also have 10 gig, multi 10 gig upstreams, and we operate our own IP space. So we're not beholden to IP space of our data center providers or circuit providers. We're able to do multi-region deployments, leveraging Citrix, NetScalers, global load balancing, of course, proper database and file distribution between those backend infrastructures, so that it might be a DR solution with more of a hot standby, or it may be actually providing low latency services to different regions of the US or even to the world. Again, I'm not going to read through every single one of these bullets here because you guys have it on your screen, unless you're multitasking and actually relying on me to read it out to you. But with 5 minutes or so left, I want to make sure we get to the end of all the slides here, so I'm not going to go down through and read each of those bullets. All right, so this is a little more geared towards our partner community. The way that we go to market when it comes to sales, obviously being owned by Cox Business. If you're in a Cox Business region, I would encourage you to reach out to a Cox Business sales rep. We also are very, very strong in the channel, which is where these last two slides come from, and there may be some partners on the phone today that have your end users that you're a trusted advisor for, and then you leverage suppliers like RapidScale to position services that are best for your downstream customer. So this is kind of where why this slide is here for the most part. Even if you're an end consumer and you're interested in our services, you might say, well, I don't know if you're a good fit for us. I mentioned the 1 to 10 IT employees. Most of our marketing is based on the number of users, which 25 to 4,000 users. We have some customers more than 4,000 users, again, where we're looking at a component of their IT and not all of their IT. And we certainly have some customers with less than 25 users, but those are typically 0 IT employees. From a support perspective, to be honest, they're a bit more of a challenge because they don't have that resource that's on the ground. Limited IT staff, that probably speaks to almost any company for the most part, and not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's the way most businesses operate, but at the same time, we can take a limited IT staff and kind of change that narrative to the IT staff being able to be really proactive and work on the line of business applications, and then leverage a partner that really has the experience in the team and the staff and the experience to provide those backend services. And I mentioned earlier in the webinar where our verticals are really strongest, and that's if there's healthcare, or sorry, if there's compliance. And as you can see from that bullet, it speaks directly to that: healthcare, legal, financial, manufacturing. We're very strong in, because we can have conversations around those regulatory requirements and provide solutions that meet those. And if you're interested in learning more about the types of things that we do, this is a completely free platform that we've launched towards the end of last year. It's just really, how can you learn more about not necessarily what we do? It's actually rare in the training that we talk about the specific RapidScale things. Of course, it does happen. It's inevitable, but that's not the intent for this platform. And it's a cloud training and enablement platform. If you're a partner and you want to learn more about what we do and how you might be able to position services better for your downstream customers, I think it's a really, really great platform. I've gone through it myself. In fact, you'll see me on some of those videos. It's a little weird to watch yourself, but there's some really great guys that are in these videos that are very smart in what they do. It might be sales specific. Most of it is technology specific. And I would encourage you to go to technologyleadership.academy, sign up. Again, it's completely free. And let us know if they have any questions. There's ways to contact us from that webpage. So Sashi, I'll hand it back to you. I think we're right about where we need to be on time.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Dallin. Thanks for walking us through these slides as well. So we do have a few questions from the audience. I'll go ahead and take this up, and then I'll let you answer those. Okay, so the first one is, do we have to build or prepare anything on our side to use RapidScale or Citrix products?
I would say that there's probably a scenario where yes, maybe. In most cases, we are taking over really all of the IT infrastructure from a customer. We can certainly take just a component. If we're talking about a Citrix virtual desktop solution, in most cases, we're hosting everything that's a dependent resource for that virtual desktop environment. Some of the exceptions on that could be maybe you have NetScalers in place and want to continue to leverage the networking and the ingress egress for the solution. And then we would just have some backend connectivity and just host the virtual desktop platform. That's a use case that makes sense. Perhaps we're just doing the virtual desktop portion of things and including the NetScalers, but the backend applications you want to maintain on your infrastructure. Another scenario where that can work just fine. You might want to take your existing infrastructure, even though it's dated and needs a refresh, extend the life of that, and maybe use that as a DR site, and then move the primary over to our infrastructure, which gets refreshed on a regular cycle that you don't have to worry about. So there's some scenarios there that could end with an end state where there's infrastructure, but in most cases, we are moving off of that. We've got some flexibility there.
Thanks. And I think the next question follows the same one. Like, what other offerings you provide to customers? Is it only CVAD service or anything else?
We have quite a few services. We probably could take another hour talking about the other services that we provide, but really it comes down, most of what we do is replacing the existing IT needs of a company. When I say replacing, I don't mean people, but it's infrastructure as a service. It's data protection. Data protection could be backup as a service or disaster recovery as a service. Our security solutions wrap around pretty much everything. So again, it might be something like end user awareness training or product adoption inside of Office 365. And obviously you can see on the slide deck here, we've got DaaS, which is desktop as a service. Office 365, I think we have a really compelling offering there where we're wrapping in migration, backup of Office 365 data, which a lot of companies I don't think really consider. It's on Microsoft, it's on the cloud, and just leave it at that, cross your fingers. Product adoption, migration, and obviously the licensing itself. Desktop as a service it was the reason the company was founded in the first place, and we've been doing that for a very long time as a hosted solution. So not VDI, but DaaS. I'm sure I've missed something just off the top of my head, but we really try and provide that full picture all the way down to help desk support for a company.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have another question on GPU. So what % of users leverage GPU for virtualized desktop, and do you see the need to have them for all desktops in the future?
That's a good question. Percentage, I couldn't answer that really. It's a low percentage for sure. It's not common that we come across an opportunity where the company has a need for GPU where they're able to take advantage of the other benefits of a hosted desktop. So what I mean by that is they're probably doing some kind of on-premises based GPU acceleration today, AutoCAD, Revit, and they probably have those workstations in place today. Usually those opportunities come to us and they're trying to save money. And it's strictly a price play. They're not looking at the benefits of mobility, security, reduction of capital spend. So moving to a more predictable model. And when the company doesn't see those additional benefits, which for GPU is rare, then they're probably not going to move to that model. So what we'll do in that case is we may take that business and move the majority of the users to a cloud desktop solution, and the AutoCAD, Revit, the advanced graphics users might maintain their local presence because it just doesn't make sense for the business. Now, with that, to the latter part of that question, how do we see that looking in the future? Well, certainly the cost of the cards will come down. That'll give us a better opportunity to provide that service on a lower cost model. But also the technology in the software is getting better. Windows 10, for instance, ISO, there was a big jump in Windows 10 being able to handle more intense graphics, maybe not all the way to a GPU hardware-based solution, but being able to handle those graphics better, especially in a virtual desktop environment. So we've been able to come closer to that GPU type performance without the hardware, but there are still use cases where the hardware is certainly needed. I'm not suggesting we've got Revit and AutoCAD users not with GPU and they're happy. We wouldn't propose that type of solution. So I don't see, unless the demands of the software outpace the ability of the software to provide those types of services, I don't see that shifting a lot. It hasn't shifted a lot in the last, say, 5 years that I've seen. As far as the demand for GPU goes, I think the demand is about the same. I think the hardware costs need to come down before the adoption of GPU in the cloud starts to make more sense for businesses in general.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Yeah, so the next one follows. Do you provide the offerings globally, or is it limited to any geo, any particular geo?
100% globally. I think the only thing that might limit the ability to service a particular region in the world would simply be latency. We've had some customers that have a presence in India, and what we do at that point is start doing trace routes between that customer's location in India and, say, Hong Kong or Amsterdam, and determine whether or not we feel that the in-place peering has a low enough latency in order for the experience to be acceptable. In some cases it is. In some cases we've got to come up with something else. We're also very flexible when it comes to how we peer in the different data centers. And if we have an opportunity to win business with a company and it's justifiable from a business perspective, we will add peering, say for instance, into Hong Kong with a provider that has a good presence in India. And at that point, we're able to cut down on that latency. So as far as the services go that we overlay, unless there's a legal reason why we can't export the service to that country, from a business perspective and how we handle our services, we're 24/7 help desk. So the other limiting factor potentially could be if you needed non-English support for the services. But no, we don't limit otherwise.
Okay, great. So that's all I had from my side, Dylan. Thanks for answering these questions and
absolutely
walking us
Thanks for having
these
us.
slides as well. You're welcome. Any final words you would like to tell to our audience?
Just thanks for joining. Thanks for the time. Give you a few minutes of your day back. If anybody on the call is interested in learning more about either our partnership program or just in our services, please reach out and let us know. RapidScale.net. Again, the Technology Leadership Academy is a great resource as well. So thanks again, everybody, for joining, and I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Dylan. Everyone for joining the call, and I would like to thank everyone for joining this Citrix Ready technical webinar series. With this, we will conclude this webinar. Have a wonderful day ahead.